Hi, I'm Janelle Evans, co-founder of Strategic Interactions, and I specialize in helping high achievers transform into extraordinary leaders. And I want to share in this video 7 clues that your EQ could use a tune-up. I've been talking with so many people lately about how they feel re-entering their offices, going out to restaurants again, as we begin to loosen up some of the pandemic-related restrictions that we've all been under for the last 14 months. And I was talking to a client specifically about this who said, I'm getting more used to being social, going into the office a couple of days a week, but, I feel like my EQ is a bit rusty because I haven't had that many face-to-face interactions other than Zoom, which we've all been using for business as well as any personal connections. And while she thought, before the pandemic, she had a pretty high level of EQ, just not having to use some of those skills in the same way made her feel a little less confident when it came to competencies like positive outlook or emotional self-control, inspirational leadership, and organizational awareness, just to name a few. EQ is the abbreviation for emotional quotient, which is a measure of our emotional and social intelligence. And our level of EQ has a tremendous impact on how we show up, particularly for leaders, and how we communicate, how effectively we manage our own emotions and influence those of others, how we manage our relationships. So much of that is all about our emotional intelligence. And my client admitted that she just didn't feel as sharp EQ wise as she had before the pandemic. And I think it makes a lot of sense. We're just kind of out of practice with having so many interactions with people throughout our day. Leaders need EQ more than ever to overcome things like the pandemic fatigue that so many are feeling. We're creating this new normal, and that alone takes a ton of energy. And leaders also have to continue to effectively inspire and motivate and help teams who are still, many of them functioning virtually or in some kind of hybrid workplace environment. Because the frequency of face-to-face interactions may continue to be limited for some time. So I started to think about, as we re-enter, going back to offices and going out socially and so forth, how would people, particularly leaders, know if maybe their EQ could use a tune-up? What would be happening? What would they be experiencing after having gone through one of the most challenging years of our lives, right? We had all had those days where our emotions were just out of control because our world seemed upside down. So, as a person who teaches leaders, particularly how to develop their EQ skills and competencies, I also know firsthand what it looks like if someone lacks EQ in a particular area. So, if you haven't been feeling on top of your EQ game, I want to share with you 7 clues or signs that maybe your EQ could also use attention. All right, so here they are. The first clue: you're easily stressed out. Now, are you aware of the things that are continuing to stress you out? And if so, are you doing anything about it to eliminate that stressor or to minimize the impacts of that stressor on you? People with high EQ, they are better equipped to tolerate stress because they recognize when they get triggered, and then they're able to manage that impact of being triggered. They manage their emotions and they control how they want to respond in any situation, no matter what the circumstances. The second clue: you're not open to feedback from anyone. So, are you thinking that you've kind of mastered everything during the pandemic, or that there's nothing else that you can learn in the future or improve on? Do you believe you stopped growing, or that you can't, again, learn anything new? It's hard sometimes for us to see things in ourselves that other people can see, particularly when they care about us and they're trying to give us very constructive feedback. But people with high EQ are open to feedback because they're always eager to learn and improve. They know they don't have all the answers, They want to continue to be curious, and they want to grow and learn and always be getting better and better. The third clue, you can't move on from a mistake. Maybe something happened during the pandemic that, you made a mistake, everybody knows it. So are you feeling stuck about that? Something that happened maybe months ago. Because people with high EQ don't dwell on mistakes. They actually look at those as learning experiences, don't want to repeat them, but they integrate what they learned and they move on. And they're highly unlikely to make that mistake again. The fourth clue, you interrupt others more often than you realize. So if you've been getting feedback that you're interrupting people, that backs up that particular clue. And maybe being socially isolated could have dulled your whole attunement to really pay attention when someone is talking and not interrupt them with what you're already thinking you want to say in response to it. You want to practice active listening, right? So if you're apologizing for interrupting people, that again reinforces this clue that maybe your EQ could use a tune up. People with high EQ are able to watch themselves and they manage the impulse to interrupt because they know what that does to the other person. It's not respectful, and people can feel devalued and certainly not heard if they're constantly being interrupted. People with high EQ are patient and they're genuinely interested in knowing what other people have to say. Continuing on here, the fifth clue, you ignore your negative feelings. Now, if you're feeling exhausted from trying to feel positive all the time, then that would back up this clue. People with high EQ don't pretend that they never have a negative emotion like sadness or fear or disappointment or frustration. Instead, they acknowledge that they have those feelings, but they don't marinate in those feelings to the point they can't function, right? They recognize them and then they take intentional action to change their emotional state, to begin to feel more positive, but they don't deny the negative feelings that they have been experiencing. And they're actually quite curious about it and try to understand why they're having such negative emotions. The sixth clue, you blame others for your feelings. And it's a lot easier to blame other people for making you angry or, feeling less than or frustrated. But, the truth is this, no one can make you feel anything. People with high EQ understand that and they accept that they are 100% in charge of their emotional home, no matter the circumstances. They adopt more of a this is happening for me attitude than this is happening to me attitude. And the seventh and final clue that maybe your EQ could use a tune up is this: you're not interested in other people. Has being socially isolated diminished your level of interest in others? Some of this may just be a temporary response to being, in quarantine, being not around people as much, right? You've gone more inward. However, people with high EQ know it's critically important to demonstrate genuine interest in other people, because that is going to build trust and that is going to improve the quality of all of their relationships. They know that if they intentionally express interest in others, that will be the result. And that is what they desire. Just imagine going out with somebody and having a conversation and it's one-sided because maybe, you or the other person is just talking about themselves. It's much harder to lead people to if they think that you don't care enough to get to know them, right? So managing relationships is a core EQ skill. And it becomes easier if you invest time in getting to know your team members, clients, colleagues, even family members, right? So people with high EQ demonstrate their interest in others by initiating conversations, getting together, and asking good questions that provide opportunities to really explore, getting to know someone better. So why does EQ matter, especially if you're a leader? The truth is, you absolutely cannot be as successful as if you don't have EQ. It's not in your best interest to lose control of your emotions, which is what happens when you don't have EQ. No one's going to want to work with you or hang out with you socially. It's not in your best interest to act impulsively and without being concerned about the impacts on other people. It's not in your best interest to seek to win at any cost when you have a conflict with someone. You just damage relationships. And it's not in your best interest to not be open to constructive feedback. That means you just stop learning and growing. It's not in your best interest to avoid conflicts and let them escalate into big problems when, if you had the conflict management skills, which is also an EQ competency, you could have solved that problem when it was much smaller and easier to solve. So leaders with EQ get more opportunities for promotions, they usually make more money, and they have genuine support and collaboration from their teams who are all working together to achieve the goals that they've set forward. And organizations will always seek out extraordinary leaders with high EQ who can inspire and motivate other people to achieve shared goals. So investing time and resources into developing your EQ strengths will distinguish you so much more as an effective leader and help you really stand out. As a survey by Career Builder recently indicated that 71% of employers said that they valued EQ over IQ because employees with high EQ were more likely to stay calm under pressure, resolve conflict effectively, and respond to coworkers with empathy. So what about you? Does your EQ need a tune-up after the year plus that we've all been through? If so, the good news is you can focus time and energy on it, and over a fairly short period of time, you can really up-level all of your EQ skills and competencies. I work with clients every week, helping them do exactly that. And that increases their self-awareness, their social awareness, their ability to control their emotions and manage relationships really, really well. So if that is something that interests you, you can reach out to me. My email is listed here in the description of the video because it is best to practice EQ skills with someone who is trained to teach them. So you can just let me know. And I'll close with a quote that I have here from Joshua Friedman, who's an author and emotional intelligence specialist. Emotional intelligence is a way of recognizing, understanding, and choosing how we think, feel, and act. It shapes our interactions with others and our understanding of ourselves. It defines how and what we learn. It allows us to set priorities. It determines the majority of our daily actions. And research suggests it is responsible for as much as 80% of the success in our lives. Take care.